Welcome to Tea Dilly, where we cheer to educated conservative conversation and values. My name is Christy McLaughlin. You can call me Christy. Within 10 days of Joe Biden's administration, he has signed 42, you've heard that correctly, 42 executive orders. The House and Senate are controlled by the radical left, and the radical left now has control of the executive branch. Conservatives and Republicans alike are wondering, what's next? Is there a future for the Conservative and Republican Party? Representative McCarthy, minority leader of the House, met with President Trump in Mar-a-Lago to discuss the future of the party and said that they are putting up a united front. But conservatives like myself are worried, and we're wondering, is there ever going to be a future for the party if the radical left is in control and they can ensure that there is never a fair and free election ever again in the United States? Their radical policies will prevent a fair and free election. With me today, I have Representative Byron Donalds. He actually was my opponent in District 19 of Florida, congressional race in the primaries. He will be discussing what it is first representing in Congress for Southwest Florida, and also what we can expect from Republican leaders like himself to combat Joe Biden's radical policies. Take a look. All right, with me, I have Representative Byron Donalds. He represents District 19 of Florida. How are you doing today, Byron?
Doing good. How you doing, Christy?
I'm doing really great. So I have a couple of questions. You're currently in the minority of the House of Representatives. What is that like in your first few weeks as a freshman congressman?
Honestly, it's actually not the best feeling at all. It kind of sucks. And really that's because the House is really disorganized, from my opinion. I came out of the Florida legislature. Our schedules were intact. Our timetables were intact. We actually followed our rules and our processes. And even though you have political disagreements in the chamber, that's not the issue. There was a respect for the calendar, respect, frankly, for the other members' time, and it was a respect for the constituencies, all constituencies at the legislative level in Florida. In Congress, Nancy Pelosi just does what she wants to do. There's no rhyme or reason. Things just pop up at the last minute. We might be scheduled to have votes for a week. All the votes get canceled. So literally, you could fly up, be ready to go vote, and then she just pulls everything off the floor, and you're in D.C. Like, why am I here? Not to mention, of course, you had an impeachment vote, which was I thought the first time they impeached Donald Trump was a complete waste of time and effort and political lunacy. This one even went past that because she did it with no hearings. We had no hearings, no ability to comment. President never had an opportunity to defend himself. Members of Congress, in my opinion, are a tainted jury because obviously the Capitol incursion happened when we were all in the middle of counting electoral votes. So, you have members who would never be allowed to sit in a regular jury trial if they were tainted or if they were the victim, so to speak. Yet, and still, here we are, not even a week later, voting on impeachment. So that's kind of what it looks like. It's not a good process at all. There's no budget process at all. And there's a lot of work to do in Washington. Cleaning the swamp is not over by any stretch.
Well, that's very good to hear. I've referred to January as the Ides of January. It's akin to the Ides of March, in which political elites have taken down the leader of the people through fraudulent measures. You're referencing Nancy Pelosi and her abuse of power and their insistence of trying to take down President Trump's legacy of a wonderful 4 years of service. So comparatively, we now have a Joe Biden administration in which it's not even within 10 days of his presidency, and he has signed 42 executive orders. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think executive orders are trampling of the legislative process?
Actually, I'll tell you, my thoughts actually are irrelevant. I'm going to use Joe Biden's own thoughts because it was literally 4 or 5 months ago, Joe Biden himself said, I have to go about getting the votes. And if you can't get the votes, you just can't push executive orders. That's dictatorial. That's what dictators do. So using his own words, using his own measuring, his own reasoning, whatever reasoning may exist, you could clearly see that his actions are dictatorial. They are a complete affront to a democratic republic. It is a complete affront to members of Congress actually having a role in making policy for the United States of America. He's taken Barack Obama's pen and his phone and he went and got a whole order from Amazon and picked up a bunch of burner phones. And now he's running around signing order after order after order. A lot of this stuff that he's doing right now, he never discussed on a debate stage. He never discussed in a speech when he was running for the presidency. He never told the American people about any of these things. And the implications are so far reaching, whether you're talking about tens of thousands of jobs in the energy complex with the Keystone Pipeline, or if you're talking about a complete stopping of immigration policy. I was actually talking with our local law enforcement here in Collier County just today. They were telling me that because of the new rules coming down from the federal government, the 287G program is basically ground to a halt. They usually were sending 30 to 40 illegal immigrants who were in Collier County jails over to the Chrome Avenue ICE detention facility over in Miami. They are telling me now that's going to slow to 1 or 2 per week. So we were at 20 to 30, maybe even 40. It's going to creep all the way down to 1 or 2. And this is all just because Joe Biden decided to sign a piece of paper.
Yeah, and actually, on that note of Joe Biden backtracking on things that he said about a year ago on the debate stage, a year ago, Joe Biden made a statement saying that Section 240 needed to be revoked immediately. Ironically, now he's been extremely silent now that conservatives have been censored into absolute silence. President, Commander-in-Chief himself, when he was still in office, President Trump, was removed from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all forms of communicating with the people. What are your thoughts on Section 240? Do you think there's ever going to be a chance to have that revoked?
Not in this Congress, I'll tell you that right now. I think what we're going to have is new leadership in the executive branch to a degree. I think we're going to need that. And we're also going to need new leadership in Congress in both chambers if we're going to see that happen. The one thing I will say is that Section 240 needs a complete rewrite. I understand the elements of why the federal government created that section. It made sense. The issue we have, frankly, is that the social media companies are literally a cartel. They are massive companies. Obviously, the vast majority of Americans use their platforms, mainly Instagram. Well, Instagram and Facebook are the same company. That's all Facebook. And then Twitter, of course. And so they've become a cartel where they are the ones who are organizing amongst themselves what is acceptable speech and what is not. And so I think if there's anything that needs to be done with 240 at a minimum, it's to address that. They have literally oligopoly in the United States when it comes to how Americans communicate. And so there needs to be major reforms to Section 240. I just don't think this Congress is going to do it because, the left, like so many things, once they get the outcome they want, they don't want to make sure the rules are clear and fair. They want to keep power. And that's what we're dealing with.
And speaking of keeping power, referencing the many executive orders that Joe Biden has signed, one of them, in order to maintain power, is his widespread executive order regarding immigration. And that is going to specifically impact Southwest Florida. We have a lot of immigrants who travel to Florida. Of course, we would prefer that they be legal immigrants. My family is legal immigrants from Cuba. And it matters a lot to me that we follow the law and order of this country. So Joe Biden signed an executive order halting the wall being built. He reinstated catch and release, and he is going to be offering citizenship to illegal aliens at some point in his presidency. That was one of his platform points. Do you think there will be a future for the Conservative Party, for the Republican Party, with that kind of executive order in place?
I think what it does, it gives us actually a springboard to take back the House in 2 years. Listen, there's one thing that obviously was never discussed at all, frankly, during the entire presidential election. And I would even add, it wasn't really discussed that much on the Democrat side. If you watch their debates, they didn't really cover illegal immigration that much. The reason why is because under President Trump's leadership, immigration was under control. The second they knew that President Trump was leaving, you started seeing these caravans start forming again, coming out of South America. And so I actually serve on the Oversight and Reform Committee. I think that this is something that's definitely going to come up. Immigration reform policy, I think, is definitely going to come through our committee. And there's going to be a lot to say, a lot of debate on this. But the reality is that we should not be putting through massive amnesties. That's exactly what it is. I don't want to call it a pathway to citizenship. It's amnesty. The second thing is that catch and release, we should never do that kind of a policy. It doesn't make sense. It sends the wrong signal to people. Listen, I want people to come to the United States. I want them to prosper, live freely, and just do what every American wants to do in their lives. And that's just to get ahead and succeed for their lives. But you have to come in through legal channels. And this whole thing about using immigration as some racial or xenophobic foil, is completely outrageous. And I think one of the things that you're going to see with these kind of policies, you're going to see American voters and American citizens are going to actually have serious issues with this when the actual elements of the policy are explained to them.
Right. And so, one last question for you, Byron. Again, thank you for your time. Since you are in the House of Representatives, I want to ask you about H.R. 1 on the same thought of the future of the party. If Nancy Pelosi is trying to, she introduced it once, H.R. 1, in 2018, and it passed the House of Representatives. H.R. 1 would result in no voter ID, ballot harvesting, and no excuses for mail-in ballots. Will there be a future for the Conservative Party if we are not only did we try to fight voter fraud in this country, but now it's as if it's being completely ignored. The multiple allegations that occurred, there was no investigation, there was no serious action taken to reform in the ballot harvesting and the lack of voter ID. But what do you see as a future for the party if we're going to have H.R. 1 in place?
I think H.R. 1 is one of the most dangerous pieces of legislation, frankly, ever created. Because number one, it really opens up the spigot when it comes to elections. Now, look, I totally believe that if you are a legal resident and legal citizen of our country and you have the legal authority to vote, you should vote. And I don't want anything to stand in your way from doing so. But what H.R. 1 does, H.R. 1 is a unilateral expansion to get as many people to vote, whether they're legal or not. They want to decrease the legal age of voting from 18 to 16, which I think just makes no sense at all. I mean, look, I have a 17-year-old son, and God bless him, but I don't think I want him voting. He doesn't know enough yet to really be able to vote. That's just my opinion. As a father, I know this. And so I think that it's a terrible piece of legislation. Unfortunately, because they have the numbers, I think it's going to pass the House again. The real battle line is going to be in the Senate. And I hope there's just one senator who says no to this monstrosity. The second part is very simple. Elections are actually governed and the rules are set by state legislatures. That is in our Constitution. I think H.R. 1 is unconstitutional. I don't think there is any ability for the federal government to step into the election process. That is for state legislatures to do. I'm already hearing that Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania, in their legislatures, they're already hard at work about reforming their election laws, and they should. Because the one thing we all want, we want to make sure that everybody who has the right to vote can get to vote. The second thing we want to do is make sure that the process is secure so that every ballot that is counted is actually upheld and not disenfranchised by fraud or by chicanery or by courts or by different supervisors of elections who decide they want to change the rules at the 11th hour. That's what we all want as Americans. H.R. 1 doesn't do that. It has to be defeated.
And as you and I both know, the state of Florida was absolutely exemplary in ensuring that we had a fair and free election in the state of Florida. So thank you again for representing us in Southwest Florida. And thank you so much for doing this interview with me. I hope you have a great weekend.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks. It was a great time, Christy. We'll definitely do it again. You have a good weekend too.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye.